until you're ready to share the screen.
All right, we are live, or at least we should be. We're going to do a little check before we get started here for the Family Friday Museums from Your Home live stream. So if you want to learn about archaeology today, this is a good place to be. We're just going to go over and check and make sure everything is working properly as it should. Haven't had any problems yet, but we like to do a check. So I'm going to go and so if you're watching, you can watch from several different places today. Because we are talking about archaeology, we're going to be live from the Mountainville Archaeological Park's Facebook page, which looks like we are live there. And we are also going to be live from the Alabama Museum of Natural History's Facebook page. Looks like we are live and ready to go there. And we are also going to be live on the Office of Archaeological Research Facebook page as well. So let me give that a check. Looks like we are live there, so that's good. One more check before we get started from the UA Museums YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/UA Museums. That's a good place to find all of our content, all of our live streams, our Mountville Mondays, our isolation observations, and all sorts of great video content. You can go to youtube.com/UA Museums. All right, so it looks like we are good to go. All of our live streams are live, and so we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's Museums from Your Home live stream presented by the University of Alabama Museums. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I am the Communication Specialist for UA Museums. And joining me today is Lindsay Gordon from Mountainville Archaeological Park, who is the Education Outreach Coordinator there. How are you doing today, Lindsay?
Good morning, everybody. I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, doing pretty well. Happy Friday to everybody. All right, so before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that while we are live, feel free to ask us any questions in the comments. And remember, this is live, so anything can happen. So hang in there in case we have any issues. Hopefully that won't happen, but it is a live broadcast, so anything can happen. So now that we've gotten some of that business out of the way, Lindsay, where should we get started? So we're going to ask the question today: what is archaeology? So how do we get to talking about that?
So as you guys know, we are doing a 4-part series with paleontology and art versus archaeology. And so this week, last week, we met some paleontologists and archaeologists. And this week we are actually going to talk to an archaeologist and learn a little bit about archaeology. So I'm going to get my little screen share PowerPoint stuff together. If I can figure that out. Here we go.
Yeah, it's very cool that not only are you knowledgeable about all things in terms of education, but you do have an archaeology background. So we are gonna learn about that today.
Yeah, so let's talk about it. So what is archaeology? And to talk about archaeology, we have to talk about anthropology. So anthropology is the study of humankind, or what we talked about last week, human culture. And within anthropology, there are a couple of different subfields. And we call it a 4-field approach, but we're going to talk about 3 today. So there's cultural anthropology, which is the study of shared ideas and belief systems among a group of people, whether that be like languages, how their marriage and religious institutions, or how they get married, and what they are doing for their religious practices, and even how they're even related. So kinship studies. There is also physical anthropology, which is one of my specialties, which is the study of different physical aspects of humans. So that can include anything from osteology, which is the study of skeletal material. And from that skeletal material, if we encounter it, we can find out like the age of a person, the sex of that person, if they had any types of diseases that show up in the bone, which we call pathologies. And we can also do medical anthropology, which will also, I think during this pandemic time, when you guys get a little bit older out there, children, you could be a medical anthropologist and basically study how the factors of the healthcare system affected the people that were around during that time period. So I think that's going to be a cool study during this pandemic and after. And then we also have archaeology, the big one. So this is the scientific study of the human past. So just like anthropology, archaeology also has subfields. And we kind of split it into two big ones. and that's prehistoric archaeology and historic archaeology. So prehistoric archaeology can be defined, and this is one of your buzzwords, as the study of people who did not have leave a written record for themselves. You can do paleobotany, which you can study plant remains. We can do zooarchaeology. So if you're into animals and animal bones, you can study what people have eaten, what animals were present, and even underwater archaeology. There's some cool underwater archaeology currently happening in Alabama, or has been in the past couple of years with the slave ship Clotilda. So that was the last slave ship, or presumably to leave from Africa to the US, and they actually found its remains on the Alabama coast, which I thought was really cool. So there's some cool underwater archaeology going on in the state. Another aspect of archaeology, which we've talked about in previous live streams, is remote sensing. So that is a non-invasive form of research. So that can include things like ground penetrating radar, which we'll talk about in a second, because that's something that I like to do. Magnetometry, which uses the Earth's magnetic field to find different features and which we call or house structures, and hearths or fire pits, things of that nature, and different aerial photography. So right now, we're going to talk a little bit about remote sensing and ground penetrating radar in particular, because I've heard some people have been really interested in that. So with ground penetrating radar, there are a couple, it basically uses radar waves. As you can see here, the waves will go down from this antenna in a conical shape. So just imagine your ice cream cone, you see that here? And so the wave goes down and it hits a buried object, then it comes back up to this receiver or to this antenna, and it'll get read by this recorder or receiver. So how I like to describe it is, as you can see, this is me, I'm out at a cemetery. And so these are my friends. So this is an antenna. Her name is Stella. We all love Stella. She's one of my favorite people or objects. So Stella is actually married to Wheeler. So Stella can tell me how deep things are into the ground. So she can see things that are deep in the ground. And Wheeler actually helps me figure out the distance. So how far I'm going. So Stella and Wheeler love each other so much that they got married, but they're having a lot of problems communicating. So that's when Jesse, this receiver right here, comes in. So Jesse basically helps translate what Wheeler and Stella are saying so that they can have good common communication, and so that I can also help read them. So what Stella is bouncing back up to me, or what I can see on Jesse, the screen, are these things called hyperbolae, or I call them little half McDonald's arches. So you can see these little hyperbolae, and that actually shows the little disturbances. There might be some disturbances in the ground. So something may have been dug up there previously at one point. So after Jesse, Jesse also needs a little bit of help. Sometimes her patients, sometimes your therapist needs a therapist. So with Jesse, she goes into this program called GPR Slice. So Slice is like her best friend. Slice is her confidant. So we put all of that data into GPR Slice, and this is what we get out, all of these colorful spots. So if you look here, all of these blue is what I call cool spots, because when you're cold and shivering or your lips turn blue. So these are cool spots. All of this red are hot spots, or places where things might have been. So from this particular site, we ended up finding a possible pit. And GPR Slice, or Jesse's best friend, also can make things in 3D. So with that same big blob right there is this same pit in 3D. So that's how they work together. So Wheeler helped me do the distance, and Jesse or Stella helped me do the depth. And so working together, they give me a complete picture. So that's how ground penetrating radar kind of works. It's a quick synopsis of it. So with that, we talk about remote sensing, doing remote sensing because it's non-invasive. We don't want to go ahead and jump the gun and dig in places that we don't want to dig, and it helps us with what we call our research design. So we are able to have a more effective, I guess, do a more effective research with it. And it helps us with getting to finding a location where we can find or research to find artifacts. So back to our artifacts. So artifacts are anything made or modified by a human. So like our sandstone palette up here, that state artifact that we have here, the rattlesnake disc, we know that a wonderful artisan did this on the stone palette, so it became an artifact. Feature, which is another word, is a non-portable artifact, which means we can't pick it up and move it anywhere. So those things would include like house structures, storage pits, or like middens, which we call like trash pits, a whale, burials, which we don't usually do anything with those, but those are all considered to be features. So within artifacts, in artifact category, we have different categories. And some artifacts, as you could, assume, last a little bit longer than others. So we have ceramic and stone artifacts. Those are usually the most durable. So that includes like your pottery, different lithics. I actually have a stone artifact to show you. So this is a stone axe. It's pretty durable. It's really heavy, and you can kind of see all of the grooves. So this is a stone axe, so it's super durable. And so someone found this. We have bone, shell, antlers, copper artifacts. Wooden artifacts don't really last as long. So they're kind of getting in the middle of the least durable, but textiles are probably the least durable, which means they don't last as long. So just imagine burying your shirt, and leaving it outside for years and years and years. You only find little bitty shreds of that fiber. So what's really cool is like we usually find these artifacts inside features again. And so what happens with those features is that they're often revealed as stains in the soil. So if you can see down here, let me get my little arrow. You see the difference in the dirt? So this is a feature, and we only dug out a portion of it, but this is one whole feature, that lovely dark spot. And as you can see here, you can see smaller dark spots throughout this entire area that they've dug up. This is actually a map showing you like a lot of the little holes, dark spots and circles. Those are usually features. So that's a map that was probably drawn out in the field.
I had no idea, Lindsay, about features and that part of the vocabulary of archaeology. That's something new to me. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Yeah, features come in all different shapes and sizes. So post holes, we find post holes for homes. We find walls of buildings. So those end up being features. Again, like we love a good midden or a trash pit because that lets us know what's going on. Hearths or fire pits, those are also middens. So it's pretty cool. And what's also really cool is one of the things that I love is like being able to, like this is a very distinct, my computer, this is a very distinct midden, feature here. You can distinctly tell the difference between one set of this soil color and this soil color. Because remember last week, we talked about using my Munsell book, which I didn't bring with me today, but it actually helps me see the changes in the soil. So that's what it helps me to see as well. So as you can see, an archaeological site, especially a prehistoric one, it's like a 3D puzzle with missing pieces. So we have to put this puzzle together. So that's what we do. We collect all of the artifacts in a scientific manner to gather the most information that we can from them. But doing that, like we mentioned before, we have to have a research design. And with that research design, we usually try to use early historic records to help us bridge that gap. So if anybody's written anything, we sometimes use oral histories from people of descendant communities to help us bridge that gap and figure out that 3D puzzle, because there are so many pieces. So one thing that might be new to you is something called cultural resource management. And that is what the Office of Archaeological Research does. It's basically the business of archaeology. And to be honest, my lovely children, about 85% of you that enter archaeology will probably end up working in cultural resource management. And so, or you could get a PhD and work in academia. So you have tons of options. But so what happens with cultural resource management is like any place older than 50 years old, and if it contains 3 or more artifacts, that is what's considered an archaeological site. So remember that. So any place 50 years or older that contains 3 or more artifacts is considered an archaeological site. So that's where that keyword comes in. So archaeologists' jobs during at a cultural resource management firm is to help identify and survey those sites. So they can do them by going out and looking. They do them in a couple different ways that we won't have to get into today, but sometimes they're exposed artifacts, but they also do shovel tests. So that's an example of a shovel test here below. It's probably one of the most, I guess we call it the most least controlled of the archaeological techniques, but it's still controlled and scientific, where you dig a hole at a certain depth until you hit sterile to see if a site is located there. But again, we only do that small portion because we don't want to damage anything in case something is there. So again, contrary to popular belief, very few sites are excavated. So not that much excavation going on. It's because of the fact that archaeology is destructive, and a site could be completely devastated when you dig it. So you don't want to damage that site. And a lot of times we don't want to damage it because, when you guys grow up into the future, you guys might have some better technology and can do some better research than we have currently. And so we don't want to damage it so that even in the future, when you guys get older, it will be, you guys can do something less destructive. So again, as I keep repeating, archaeology is a science. So we often use the scientific method. We come up with our hypothesis, and then we put it into action and do some tests. So how we do that is we basically find create these areas. We call them test units. They're excavated in squares and trenches. After we do our research design, or maybe use ground penetrating radar, we figure out where we're going to put these test units carefully. So they're excavated in a square. Sometimes they're 1 by 1 meter or 2 by 2 meter. And then those units are typically measured, or we dig down in these levels of 10 centimeters. So each 10 centimeters is one level. After we've dug that level might have artifacts in it, like we talked about earlier. So we have to make sure that we bag and label those artifacts from that specific level. And that is what's called provenience, like figuring out or labeling and knowing exactly where that artifact or those artifacts came from is provenience. So we always have to make sure we have provenience. That's a key word. So with the unit floors and walls, we try to make sure that they're kept straight so we can see all of that stratigraphy, which we talked about earlier, and we can identify those features that we talked about earlier. So all dirt is screened for artifacts, and sometimes even we take soil samples because there might be some, like we talked about paleobotany, so there might be some little seeds or something in there that we could send off to a lab. Again, notes are very important. So we make many maps of floor plans. We make tons of maps of floor plans and profiles, and we draw them using our compass and our notebook and all of our information that we gathered. But we also take lots and lots of photographs of everything. It's really important that you know where every single thing came from and that everything is documented, because we don't want to lose that history. Just imagine losing a bit of your family history. You don't want to do that. So we try our best to take as good of notes as possible. We have to take excellent notes. So here's an example of provenience. So this little number up here, this first number, this whole number, sorry, or this whole line is called the Smithsonian trinomial. Say that 5 times fast. So the first number indicates the state, because we were the first state to be alphabetically to be given that an indication. This TU shows basically signifies the county. So we're in Tuscaloosa County here. And this is 500. So that is the site designation. So the sites are given, archaeological sites are given numbers. So this is the 500th site. And I know this site because this is the Moundville site. So 1 TU 500 is Moundville's site designation. So any archaeologist can look at 1 TU 500 and know that it is Moundville. Here is where this artifact is found. It's found around Mound R, and this gives us directions of where it's found. It's located in Unit 2, so that lets me know there were more than one unit. So it was found in Unit 2, and they were in Level 3. So they were down 30 centimeters when they found this artifact, approximately. And then there was a feature there. So they actually gathered that in that level, there was a feature 13, which it looks like there were lots of features, and it ended up being a storage pit. So in this bag should be fill dirt with plant remains. So this basically gives us all of the information that we need to know about what is in that bag. And so it gives me the date. So it was January 23rd, 2009. And I know that this is Betsy Irwin's initials. So I know, so basically you can see how much information is needed to keep the provenience for artifacts. So we have to make sure that we have all of this information. And any archaeologist with good notes should be able to identify what's in this bag and what's going on. So we talked about the law of superposition and stratigraphy a little bit earlier. So we're just going to go over it again. It's like making a good little sandwich. I don't know if you like peanut butter and jelly or a bologna sandwich. But so the bottom layer is your oldest layer. So if then we slap on our cheese, and then we slap on our tomato. So we know that the youngest layer is our bread that's on top. So it's the same thing that happens in the field. The youngest layer is that top layer, sometimes with the grass on it. You guys see the grass? And then the oldest layer is fairly deep from that. And usually right under that oldest layer, or the oldest layer, is what we call sterile soil, which means it's not been touched. So again, after we finish with all of that great work out in the field, there's still more work to be done. So we have to take it into the lab. So we have to prepare it, like by doing analysis, and then we get to store the data after excavating it. So the data that we usually have to make sure that we have includes like maps and photos, all of our artifacts, our soil samples, and our drawings. So we use all of those things to make sure that we put that puzzle together. And then that data sometimes is analyzed to reveal a pattern, which is really cool. Some other things that we do is we take different samples when we're out in the field. Like we talked about earlier, we take soil samples, which can be floated, which we'll talk. Floating is basically what it says. You put the soil sample into this huge barrel, and it uses a bunch of pressure to float all these materials, organic materials, to the top, and they actually float out, and we can take them and send them to a lab. We send charcoal samples off for radiocarbon dating, and we have faunal remains, which means those are like bones, and the zooarchaeologists can tell us, what kinds of animals were being eaten during that time period, or what type of animals were present. So the ethnobotanists would study our plant remains, and then our artifacts are washed and sorted and analyzed by the different categories. So there are tons of different categories, whether it's pottery or like stone tools, or like usually lithics. And then sometimes we need some help. Again, all archaeologists don't know everything, and we rely on each other a lot. So we call other experts in to consult or to talk with them if necessary. So for instance, like if there was a Moundville iconography or found on a pot, we would call Kit Riley or Dr. Knight. So we always try to call in and get and consult with experts as much as we can.
Yeah, Lindsay, that was something that until you put that slide up, I hadn't really thought about that. I just thought about archaeologists just studying the artifacts and putting whatever information they had down on it. But that is true that you wouldn't know absolutely everything. You would have to reach out to other people that are experts in the field. Because what I've learned about archaeology from you all is that archaeology is about collecting information. In a lot of ways. And so you want to get as much information as possible as you can about any given artifact.
Yeah. And it's, again, we want to share that information too. And we have to make sure that we're sharing accurate information to the public and make sure that our, again, it's a science. So we want to make sure we're doing things that are well informed. So we have to bring in experts for that. And I always end up learning something new. I think that's one of my favorite things about archaeology in general is that you learn something new every day. So with, while we're doing that analysis, we start splitting up when we talked about artifact categories a little bit. We start splitting them up into diagnostic artifacts. And so diagnostic artifacts have characteristics that tell archaeologists like when and who made them. And they're usually found repeatedly at different sites. So they become like time markers. So say you find the same 1960s Coke can at all these different sites. For instance, I have one here, and this is probably one of the most diagnostic artifacts. This is a Clovis point. And so this was a point used by the people in the Clovis culture. They were around 10,000 to 7,000, I want to say BC, really old. These are the people who actually, you guys might be familiar with, that hunt mastodons and saber-tooths. But all three of these Clovis points came from different sites in Alabama. But they let us know that people from that same time period were located in that area. So that's what's really cool about diagnostic artifacts. So there are some non-diagnostic artifacts that can be associated with diagnostic artifacts that still help us give clues and pieces to our puzzle. So say we know that this piece of, we found I guess an arrowhead, or for lack of a better term, a point that was associated with a piece of pottery that could have been around the same time period. So we know that they probably were from the same time period. So it helps us give semi-accurate dates. We call it relative dating, which we'll get to. So like I was saying, so we have absolute dating, or there are a couple of different ways that we date things, because again, we want to make sure our time periods are pretty distinct. So we have absolute dating, which basically uses things like charcoal to do radiocarbon dating. So we use the carbon to date things and give like a good year or age in years. And then we have relative dating, which determines whether one artifact is younger or older or contemporary with another artifact. So we use a couple of artifacts. So artifacts actually play a huge role in this one, whereas charcoal is big for absolute dating. Relative dating uses a lot of what we use artifacts for that. So an example of this would be shell tempered pottery. And I have a piece, and I think this is Moundville, say it's Moundville incised, so you can see the decorations. But this piece of pottery, if you look really closely at it, it's a rim piece. You can see these white flakes inside of it. I don't know if can you see it, Rebecca?
Yeah, we can see it really well.
Okay, so you can see those white flakes. So shell tempering pottery, and so tempering is basically materials added to help with so that the pots don't shrink or crack as much while they're drying. So shell temper pottery is a real big indicator of like Mississippian culture. So a lot of the Mississippian culture, people in that culture were using shell, and we know that date range is from 800 to 1500 AD. So with that, we're actually going to do an exercise with it. So we're going to actually talk about and make some pottery real quick, and you guys can make it with me at home. And we're actually going to put some temper in it. So we have our pottery activity supplies. So guys, remember this, this recipe? We're going to make salt dough. And so you guys can make this salt dough at home. You just need water, flour, and salt. It's really simple. Here are the directions for it. And again, we will have the slide up for you guys so that you'll use it this week, and I know you'll use it next week as well for your activity. So you can make this salt dough. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a quick little pinch pot. And again, I had to roll up my sleeves because we're about to get a little messy. So I have my salt dough, or my dough. This is more like a Play-Doh consistency. I had to put it in water because it was drying out a little bit. And so what you want to do before I start that, I'm going to add some temper, get my hands dirty. So sometimes I use glitter for this activity. Today I had some sprinkles, and I think it'll do just as well. So we're going to add some sprinkles into it. Oh, that's a lot of sprinkles. Might not need that many. Well, now it's all over my hands. Cool. All right. So now I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to roll it into a nice ball. So you want to make sure you roll it into a ball. Again, my hands are going to be really dirty. So we're going to make it into this nice ball. I don't know if you can see my little ball, but we're going to make this into a nice ball. And so what we're going to do now that we have our wonderful nice ball and Miss Lindsay's hands are all dirty, so we're going to take our thumb and we're going to place our thumb in the center like this. And then just start pinching the insides and pushing your thumb in the middle. So you'll make a nice little pot. So here are the directions for that. But so if you can see it, you can see that I have my little pot here with and you can also see all my little temper on the inside, just like that shell. You can also fire this at 150 degrees in your oven, your salt dough, and you'll make a nice little pot. So that's my little pinch pot. So here's a finished one. This might be, I use different clay for this one, but here's, when we use our red clay, this is what it looks like.
Wow, that looks great. I'm very impressed. Yeah.
I was like, did you get to see the temper in the other one? Did that work?
Yeah, no, that looks great.
So that's a quick activity. You can make a pinch pot. You can make, and we can also use the coil method. So we have instructions for that also below. And here's my little coil method pot. It's dried. So it just basically making I call them little worms, and put them on top of each other and pressing down in the center. So that's your little coil pot, excuse me. So now that we've made our pots and we've talked about archaeology, let's talk about stewardship a little bit. So let's remember that archaeological sites are non-renewable natural resources. So once they're destroyed, they go away and all that information is lost. And we will all need you guys' help to be good stewards of the heritage of our state. So a steward is a person that takes care of something. So we're hoping that you guys will work with us together to preserve our archaeological sites and make sure people are taking care of them, and make sure people aren't digging in places that they're not supposed to dig, and helping us gather as much information as possible. So if you want to, at this moment, since we want to cherish and love our state's history, just write a little bit about how you want to help preserve Alabama's heritage. Just a little blurb in the comments. We'd love to hear about how you would like to do that. And we hope that you all would become stewards with us. So that is my archaeology spiel for today.
Well, Lindsay, we do have one question about the activity. Okay. So when you were putting the sprinkles in, what were they actually representing there?
So the sprinkles were actually representing the shell. So the shell that is, or a different temper, because there are different types of temper. You have grog temper, which are other broken pots. People put sand in them to reinforce the pots. But this one was in particularly was for shell. So these little shell pieces.
Yeah, I'm learning, especially with the mounds, that shell was a great resource for people, especially the Native American people. They use that a lot in building mounds and creating pottery and things like that. So sometimes I don't think about using shell much because it's not something, you know, I'm not near a beach. So
Right.
Unfortunately, I'm not near a beach, but shell is a great resource that can be used for a lot of different things.
It is. They use it for different artwork too, because they're like shell gorgets and like necklaces and things of that nature. I mean, they were like, I guess down on the coast, they were eating it. And so, yeah, so it's a cool resource.
That's really awesome. Well, that was a great activity. And thank you for sharing that information about archaeology. I know I learned a lot here today that I can take with me and add to my vocabulary of archaeology terms. So are there any things that you would like to leave us with in terms of general thoughts about archaeology and why it's important?
Well, yeah, anyone can be you can be an archaeologist, and help us. Stewardship is important. Again, I'm just gonna leave with that. Like, make sure, please help us take care of our wonderful archaeological resources and help us preserve our sites. So that's what an archaeologist does. And we hope that you join us in doing so.
Yeah, archaeology is really important to understand our history. So,
Right.
so thank you for sharing that with us today. And I guess that's going to do it for this Museums from Your Home live stream. We'll be doing this every weekday, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. And each day will feature a different aspect of UA museums. Monday, we're actually going to be heading back over to Moundville Archaeological Park to hang out with them on their Facebook page for Moundville Mondays. And if you have any questions about any of our live streams that we're doing with Museums from Our Home, Museums from Your Home, or any of the video content that we're creating, you can go to museums.ua.edu/museums from your home. That will give you the full live stream schedule that we've got going on, where to watch, and what we're going to be talking about. We also have archived videos and live streams there. So if you missed anything, don't worry about it. You can still go back and find it there. Another good way to keep in touch with all of our video content and our live streams is if you subscribe to YouTube, to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/UA Museums. It's a great way to keep up with us. You'll get notified every time we go live, and you'll get the latest Moundville Mondays that Lindsay hosts. And you'll get to see all of our isolation observations and all the video content that we have up on our YouTube channel. So that's a great way to keep up with us there. If you like what we're doing and want to support UA Museums, you can go to give.ua.edu/museums. That'll give you the opportunity to become a supporting member of the museums. So we would love it if you considered doing that. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it here with Miss Lindsay here from Moundville. And we would like to thank everybody who is watching and everybody who will watch and visit UA Museums from your home. Hope everyone have a great day and have a great weekend.